I think everybody.
All right. Okay, you are up. Thank you. Right. Okay, good morning, everybody. So my partner, Madeline, and I are from the Safe Passage program. Has anybody ever heard of Safe Passage before? Okay, one person. That's very good. That's a good start. So I'll just introduce myself really quickly, and then Madeline can introduce herself. My name is Lisa Chiaputo, and I am the court advocate for Safe Passage. And Safe Passage is a sexual assault and domestic violence program and shelter. So we have just a lot of different services kind of housed under one roof. And in my position as a court advocate, I help people file orders of protection. Orders of protection are, it's kind of like a restraining order, but it is something that is for people that have been in intimate partner relationships, or if you've been a victim of stalking. So even if you've never been in a relationship, if you've been stalked by a person, that constitutes enough of a threat for them to be able to issue an order of protection. And so I help people write up these orders. I help them kind of go through and catalog all the incidences in which they've been abused, and that we're trying to establish a fear, a legitimate fear of having this person come in contact with them. So,
however, it doesn't necessarily stop.
Yes.
You need to always be vigilant.
Yes, orders of protection, definitely sometimes it can even exacerbate or make the situation worse. So sometimes we'll come across individuals who don't want to file an order, and it's completely understandable. They know their situation probably better than we do. We can only advise them and guide them and help them with what they feel they need. So also then I can accompany the individuals to court. I help get them connected to Legal Aid of East Tennessee. Generally, we have a partnership with them, and we help try to get them legal representation if they need that. And I'm a sounding board. If they don't understand something that's coming down through the courts, or what the order means, or anything like that, or just to be there with them, because you're having to go to court and face your abuser. You have to go up, right? It's in civil court, so you're on the docket with people that are just there to, pay their, their health, whatever. If they're getting sued by the doctor's office or something like that.
Yes,
so it's really intimidating, I think, for an individual even to come to court and to face their abuser. And a lot of times people dismiss their orders because they're afraid to go and see their abuser there, or for just a lot of different reasons. So I just try to be there with them and encourage them through the process. And so that's my role. I work with both domestic violence and sexual assault victims. And I'll let Madeline let you know what she does.
Well, I'm sexual assault and DV, which is domestic violence. And we're located here at the Family Justice Center. So if you need anything, it's kind of an encompassing facility where you can get all kinds of different services, legal aid or orders of protection, legal and civil support, safety planning, counseling, and advocacy. So if you guys need any help ever, remember that you've got the Family Justice Center, and that's located on Montgomery and King, right on the corner there.
Mm-hmm. Right
Downtown.
near the bus station. Yeah.
And
a lot of times we have people that come in that want a specific service. They might just want court advocacy, or they just want to do safety planning. They're not sure that they're ready to get out of the situation yet, but they want to know what they should do at that point. Because a lot of people end up, I think the average times that a woman or a man leave their abuser is it 5? 4 or 5? I thought it was even higher.
Yeah.
Like, people just keep going back because...
I thought it was 7. They
Yeah.
go through the cycle 7 times.
Yeah, it's
Right,
really,
but that's
no, I agree with that. I think it is quite high because people are,
7 to 9.
yes.
Quite right.
People are, a lot of times, there are there are many reasons that people might stay in an abusive relationship. There's a whole cycle of control, and a lot of that is, we've noticed lately, especially like financial stability. When someone is in a relationship and there's financial stability, if they have children, if they get pulled away from that, they are left with nothing and they're not sure how to rebuild from there. And so that draws them back into this relationship.
But we assist with that,
Yes.
job hunting and all of that, working with the resume. We try to help them get back on their feet. We also do transitional housing, moving on to permanent housing as needed.
Yeah, so we have a lot of different services, but so do you guys have a clear idea of what domestic violence is, though? Does anybody have a good definition of what it is?
The shelter started in 1996 by a group of women, concerned citizens, that basically went to the city officials and worked all the political stuff out, and they got a house, which we can't disclose, and that's where the domestic violence victims will stay until we get it all worked out. We find them the housing that they need, we help them get the employment that they're looking for so that they can be stabilized enough to go on into permanent housing. You've got to be able to afford it. So it's a really good program, the domestic violence. And also the sexual assault is just becoming into this program. Before, I think they offered it, but they didn't really focus on it. And now there's a focus on it because there's so much rape. But interestingly enough, more women are injured by battering than by rapes, muggings, and automobile accidents combined. That's a lot. So, and it's saying here that by the age of 18, 1 in 4 women will be sexually assaulted. And it's something that brings shame. I mean, people don't want to report it because they're embarrassed. So if you need to, come to the Family Justice Center. It will be all confidential. Nobody needs to know.
Yeah. And one thing that we've really discovered about domestic violence is that it's everything. It's physical, it's mental, it's verbal abuse. It can come in any shape and form. Yeah. I had this one lady that called one time, and her boyfriend was sticking potatoes in her tailpipe so she wouldn't leave. There are people that are not allowed to eat. They're kept in the house, and the children are allowed to eat, but the individual isn't allowed to. There is a lot of times there are strict controls over their spending or who they talk to. They're not allowed to have phones. It can vary. It can really vary. And part of what we do too, we have a partnership with the police department, Washington County and Johnson City, and they do what's called a lethality assessment when they're called to a domestic violence call. And it's a series of questions that are trying to see if this person is really at risk for, more aggravated assault in the future, or and it's it's questions like, has the person ever threatened to kill you? Do you have a child that doesn't belong to that person? They know that have you ever been choked or strangled? Because if you've been choked or strangled, that is definitely like a much higher risk pool that you're in at that point. So, and one thing that we really have discovered, domestic violence, it permeates all layers of society. It's not just your poor people. You can be from an affluent family. It doesn't matter. There are different stressors, but poverty definitely is an indicator. When you have issues with unemployment and things like that, your stress levels are higher, and there are more incidences of domestic violence in those cases generally. I think men
and children. I mean, it's all part of it.
Yeah.
We've had several men.
Oh yes, there are definitely men tend to not want to admit that they've been assaulted, and I think that we had a training the other day about the LGBTQ community and men survivors, male survivors, and it was amazing the amount of people in these communities that have suffered abuse. And I think it was like 50% of transsexual individuals have experienced abuse from their intimate partner. And it was, I think the highest level, it was like 61% of bisexual women have been abused sexually or in just a domestic
By their own
violence sense.
partner or somebody they
Yeah.
didn't know.
So these are really, they make up a huge percent of who is battered, I guess you would say. But I think that the rates of coming forward with it are a lot lower in those communities, and it's a really it's a difficult situation. So anyway, it definitely permeates every layer of society. We are funded by different grant programs. We have the Emergency Shelter Grant, the Victims of Crime, and FIPSA, which is Family Violence. And each of those grants come with different parameters. But we serve Washington County, Carter County, and Greene County. And we get most of our money from Washington County. And that's why a lot of our services are here. But yes.
And we've got some handouts here. We've got a variety of abuse and how it's the cycle of abuse and how it starts. And interestingly enough, I was reading this the other day, and when a woman kills her husband or a man, she gets 15 years. The guy who kills a woman might get 6. I think that's interesting.
It's usually the opposite. Usually women are not, I don't think that they get charged as stringently. Okay, another thing we wanted to, I know that you guys are working on looking for community resources. So what I did, we have, that's a big part of what we do, is getting individuals hooked up with different resources, and everybody is so, their situation is so different and what their needs are so different. And so that's a big part of what we do, just trying to get people connected to programs that help them the most. So we just made a few copies, but if you guys are interested, these are some local resources that we use. We have a lot of mental health counseling is a big thing. People that are going through this, I mean, it is very traumatic, and a lot of people suffer PTSD from what they've gone through. And so we have a lot of mental health and counseling connections. I know Helen Ross McNabb is in our same building, so that's something we try to utilize. Different transportation, food resources, because they can get food stamps quite quickly, but sometimes it's they need something immediately, which we also provide. Clothing, because sometimes you're running
without anything.
of nothing.
Yeah. No money, no nothing.
Yeah.
Just get out.
Exactly. And when we talk about safety planning, that's why it's so important to do safety planning and kind of just think about it before. I know it's not always possible to plan for everything, and sometimes there's a violent incident and you just need to leave. But if you're able to kind of think through the process and what you need, things you need to take with you, like your birth certificate or your any kind of school documents for your children, like immunizations or stuff. And we, in our safety planning, that's what we talk about, ways to keep yourself safe, but also if you do need to leave, some points of contact and what you're going to do afterward, just to help people feel like they're in control of their situation as much as they can be. So, is there anything else that we should?
I was going to say something, but I completely forgot.
It's because I'm rambling so much. I love our program. It's definitely not perfect, but we are constantly, constantly working to make community connections and to reach out to groups that might not be aware of our services. We've recently had a woman that said she would have left so long ago if she would have known that there was a support system, but she thought she would just be by herself. And we want to let people know that they're not by themselves, and we are right there with them. And so if you guys have any questions about our program or about resources or anything like that.
Domestic violence?
Yep.
You let students intern for you for their
we're talking about that.
Yeah, we have previously had interns, and I know we've discussed, especially with the court side and everything, but that is, if you're interested in something like that, you can contact, I guess, like either our office phone or our hotline, and let someone know
Oh,
that
that's
you'd be
another thing,
interested
the
in
hotline,
volunteering.
24-hour hotline,
Yes,
you can call.
yeah, that's very important. And the hotline is, oh my gosh, it's so essential, and it's something that we really, I think that it's so good that we have community partners like the police department, everything that know that when there is a domestic violence incident, to call us and try to help ease the process for some of these people because they don't know what to do. But yeah, just call. We'll give out a pamphlet about us, and that has our hotline number in there. And so if you want to call there to make your first contact, and they can give you the number for the office. But we definitely would love some volunteers.
Yes.
What credentials do you need in order to work there?
Well, you're probably going to get a background check and a drug check.
College?
But
Oh, yeah, that'd be good. That
Yeah.
would be good. I don't think it would be essential because we talked about, somebody working that's older, and we're talking about in the shelter. There's got to be a confidentiality, contract signed, there'll be things like that. You cannot talk about where you are, what you're doing. Because it's dangerous for you. Because some guy, has beat up a woman or vice versa, and then figure it out that you're working there. That's kind of scary.
don't scare them away.
I mean, they need to know. I mean, people who want to hurt people will hurt people.
Yeah. And sometimes you get lulled into a sense of safety, and
Yes.
so you always have to be aware. But
Vigilance.
Yeah, but experience in social work, and my background is in sociology, and
My social work.
exactly. So having some case management skills, we work through like the whole process with these individuals. So if you have
Crisis line, you would learn
Yeah.
crisis line.
but preferably if you are finished with your bachelor's in one of these types of programs. So it's a good place to start.
And we're also looking for a director. So why don't you pass that on?
If you're interested, please.
Yeah.
Okay, what was the series of questions called?
It's called the lethality assessment. It's the LAP. I think it's lethality assessment protocol, and it was developed. I can't exactly remember when it was developed, but it really does zero in on so many of the aspects that kind of indicate that there are going to be future problems, or their
Level of danger.
Yeah, the level of danger. I wish we had a copy of it, but the biggest ones, there are 3, and if any of the top 3 are marked, that is an immediate indication that they should be referred to us, and that's, do you think this person is going to kill you? Has this person threatened to kill you? And then further on, I think there are like 10 questions. The rest of them, 4 of those are checked yes. So that's where the choking and strangling and stuff like that, all of those questions. So, yeah, lethality assessment.
Immediately to you.
Yeah, that's what we hope for, and we hope that every officer is doing that out in the field. And we used to do it actually ourselves, but we are trying to work under a trauma-informed care system where we're not re-traumatizing them. So if they've just been abused and they're with an officer, and here we are, hey, does he strangle you? But we do have to get a feel for, in our intake on the hotline, for what the situation is. So that's where the officer gives us the answers for the LAP that they've done with the individual. And then we have to kind of gather a little bit more information about the situation and what they've gone through.
What would like a day for an intern look like?
What would it work?
A day for an intern.
Well, we're talking about basically someone more, our focus right now is on the evening shifts, because we don't have anybody right now that's working on that. So So that's kind of what our focus is right now. So it would be just however we could use you.
So any examples that you want to give her?
Well, I mean, to me, they'd be working in the shelter and bringing people in and showing them around, showing them all the safety issues and what you do, how you take the intake. It's an interesting learning experience. It really is.
Maybe, if it was a long-term internship, learning to take hotline crisis calls, that's a really big part of what we do. And learning about the counseling and case management, maybe like data input. That's a big thing. We're getting a new system, so everything is going. We're like 20 years behind. Everything's on paper. But inputting data would be important. I think that it would be a good experience to kind of see, especially from the case management perspective and how we work with individuals and
it will open your eyes.
Yeah.
It really will open your eyes.
All right. Thank you.
Well, you're quite welcome.
I'm going to, just so everybody knows, in case there's not enough handouts, I'm going to scan everything in and put it up on D2L. So as you're walking out today, if we run out of handouts, you can print them out from D2L.
This is
Okay, so we'll let Brittany get started. So
we'll take some around.
Time.
Thank you, guys. Do you already know? Oh, no.
Yes, sorry. Do you have a clicker? I have one here. Here, let me grab mine. I have it. I just have paste.
Okay.
I want to see what.
All right, guys, we're going to talk about literally word for word.
Okay. That works. Do you mind to dim the lights? I appreciate it. Okay, don't go to sleep on me, guys. Okay, so we don't have too much time, so I do sort of want to run through our services, and then I want to sort of build on what they were talking about trauma-informed care, and we're going to briefly talk about trauma-informed care and just sort of the basics of trauma, so you're aware of it. Have you guys ever really not discovered trauma, but spent some time sort of looking through trauma, how it impacts the brain, how a victim responds to trauma? Has anybody ever any work with that? Well, it's incredibly interesting. I will tell you, I'm in grad school right now, and a lot of my focus is on like trauma in the brain and counseling, EMDR, all of that fun stuff. So I'm from the Sexual Assault Center of East Tennessee. My name is Brittany Thompson. Our office here is located on 196 Montgomery Street, so these family justice flyers, that's where we're located. So we have an advocate there, and we have a therapist there, and I'll go into details about that. Our office number is this 423 number, and then we have our 24/7 crisis line, which is the 865 area code. 522-7273 is what it is. I don't know what's that. But I want to let you know, I'm from the Knoxville office, and my intention today was to go and get brochures from the Family Justice Center, and then I got pulled over. So I don't know if you got my text, but basically I'm going to go and get them and bring them back, and that's something that she can scan and distribute to you guys. So I apologize for not having this today. First off, a few statistics. Someone is sexually assaulted every 2 minutes in the United States. So we are the Sexual Assault Center. Does anyone know the difference between sexual assault and rape? Okay. So sexual assault is basically that umbrella term that states any type of sexual violence. So being the Sexual Assault Center, we're all-encompassing of any victim that's ever been abused as a child, had been sexually molested, had some type of sexual battery, or if there was rape. We used to be the Rape Crisis Center at one point, and that was heavily focused on rape, and we want to make sure that we provide our services to everyone that's been a victim of sexual violence. 44% of sexual assault victims are under the age of 18, and that's a whole different topic. 80% of sexual assault victims are under the age of 30. So the majority of people that we see is probably going to fall sort of where you guys are at right now. So 16 to 24 ages, that's our most heavily populated people that we're seeing, college students most likely. Approximately 3/4 of assaults are committed by someone the victim knows. So when we watch shows like SVU and all of these other random shows that make this, connection to rape, a lot of times we think that it's someone that we don't know, someone that jumps out of the bushes, someone that, we meet in a dark alley or something like that. Well, the truth is that a lot of the times we know the person, and that's why it is so hard, number one, to come forward about sexual assault, but also to prosecute rape and to prosecute sexual battery, is because we have that tie to that person. 43% are a friend or an acquaintance, so it's someone that we know, someone that we've been in a class with, someone that we maybe work with, someone that we have some type of relationship with. 27% are an intimate partner, and then 2% is a relative. So when we're talking about younger kids, obviously under 18, that number skyrockets. But today we're just talking about adults. So, I don't know if you can see it, but 1 out of how many women have been the victim of an attempted or completed rape in their lifetime? What do you guys think? 4. Okay, what about men? 6. Okay. So 1 in 6 women and 1 out of 33 men. Okay, so attempted or completed rape, different than a sexual assault, different than that original terminology I used. But number 2, this is going off of reported data. So stuff that has been reported to the police. And we're going to talk about the barriers with that and how hard that is to report that to police. But why do you think that the number with men is so different? What is the stigma attached to that?
They don't report it.
Yeah, why don't they want to report it?
Masculinity.
Their masculinity comes into question. Why didn't you fight back, right? Why didn't you push them off? Why didn't you say no? All of these questions. Well, are you gay? Are you homosexual? Is that something that you're into? Right? All of those things come into question when you're the victim of a sexual assault. How does that make sense? How is that okay? So what is sexual assault? Like I said, I sort of briefly covered that, but sexual assault is that umbrella term defined as intentional, unwanted, or unconsented sexual contact. So if you're forcing me, if you're threatening me, a lot of times we think that, oh, there's a gun, or there's some type of weapon, or there's some type of physical assault in a sexual assault. But what happens when we look back at those numbers, that 3/4 of the people that assault us are people we know, they're not holding a gun to our head. They're holding some type of blackmail over our head. They're manipulating us. They're coercing us. Time and time again. Well, just, come on, we did it yesterday, blah, 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 right? I'm pushing you into doing something that you're not comfortable with. And I'm holding the fact that we have some type of relationship against you. So, this includes rape and sexual battery. Now, each state has different laws as what they mean of consent, what they mean about sexual assault, what they mean about sexual battery and rape. In our state, we're actually very progressive. So, the state of Georgia, for instance, the definition of rape in the state of Georgia is a penis and a vagina, which means women cannot be perpetrated against other women. Perpetrated by other women. Men cannot be perpetrated against by other men. That's not considered rape for them. But in our state, it's any type of penetration is considered rape. So just be aware of that. So whether it's digital penetration, which means basically a finger, if it's an object, if it's any type of oral penetration, all of that is considered penetration. So just be aware of that. Okay? And then sexual battery is any type of unconsented, unwanted touching. So, in high school, right, we were talking about this the other day at our work. In high school, it was pretty much common knowledge for guys to slap girls' butts, right? We didn't consent to it. We didn't talk about it beforehand. It just happened. That doesn't make it okay, right? That's the thing that we've got to really focus to change is sort of what we're doing, going through our childhood and what we're sort of teaching them. But yeah, that's considered sexual battery. Now, is it actually going to go to court and get prosecuted? That's not my decision. But in terms of the law, that's what it's considered as. So just some laws so you're aware. basically every type of sexual violence is considered a felony, okay? So, obviously, your rape of a child, your aggravated rape, those are gonna hold a lot more penalties. They're gonna be, that Class A, which is the highest. But other than that, it really depends on your background, depends on what deal they're gonna try to offer you to get you to plead. That's not up to me. But when, it comes to like throwing the book at you, this is what throwing the book at you looks like. So barriers to reporting. Only 34% of sexual assault victims actually report to police. And a lot of times, it's because of that shame and that embarrassment that they were talking about. Imagine having to, number one, it's awkward to talk about your sex life to begin with, right? It's just not something that we want to share with a lot of people. So imagine having to share those intimate details of where you were forced to have sex against your will to someone that you don't know, and most likely someone of the opposite sex. That's not going to be an easy conversation, and that's not going to be something that most of us want to do. A lot of times we're just going to take it in on ourselves. We have that fear that we will not be believed. A lot of the victims that we have worked with, they initially told their best friends or someone very close to them, and their friends played it off like it wasn't rape, right? So then they thought, well, if they didn't believe me, there's no way that the police would believe me, right? And they sort of drop it there. They don't know how much control they're going to have after they report. So the whole thing about rape, one of these societal myths that we face is it's a crime of passion, right? Oh, I was just so overwhelmed that I had to have sex with you, right? That's total bullshit, right? What we find is that rape is a crime of it's blah, blah, blah. It's a crime of power, and it's a crime of power and control, okay? So please be aware that if someone says something like that, or they're trying to use that against you, right, they can stop themselves, okay? Not wanting anyone to know may fear retaliation. So what if that person is my supervisor? What if they're on an athletic team and they're prominent in the community? What am I going to have to go through in order to report that? Because a lot of times, it all falls back on the victim. You were the one who went through this. You were the one who's traumatized, but yet you have to overcome all of these obstacles just to report, just to be heard. May feel guilty or responsible, right? I'm sure you guys have heard of victim blaming and sort of all that comes with that. So false reporting. So there is a project, and we work a lot with law enforcement. So trying to get this to a law enforcement perspective is very difficult because they see a different perspective than we see. But there was a project called the MAD Project, and basically what it did is there were no statistics about false reporting prior to this MAD Project reporting. So what happens is law enforcement agencies, what am I trying to say? They put the title of a false report on many different things. There was no law enforcement agency that was putting false reporting in sort of a universal thing, like if this happens and this happens, then it's false reporting, right? That wasn't like universal across the board. So what this MAD Project did was went to several law enforcement agencies, offered them this opportunity to be universal, to be unified, and file a false report in this way in terms of sexual assault, and then gathered that data. So based on that data, only 2 to 8% of reports of rape are considered false. There's nothing that you are gaining from reporting a rape, right? Really, you're losing a piece of yourself when you do this. It is so hard for people to come forward and talk about it. So it's not something that people do just left and right like people might think. And there's a lot of other reasons, like I said, it was just that universal thing in that small area. But, across the nation, there's a lot of reasons why people put them as false reports. The investigator can't get a hold of you. Maybe the initial information that you gave them, you withheld a little information, maybe that you were drinking, maybe you were somewhere you shouldn't have been or something like that, and you're afraid you're going to get in more trouble. So there's a lot of reasons as to why the false reporting rate is the way it is. So this is just something I pulled from RAINN, but this is the sad reality that we're facing every single day. So out of 1,000 rapes, 994 perpetrators were walk-free. So the perpetrators that aren't walking free are the ones that there was, that victim at that moment went and got a kit done, at least 72 hours pretty much after it happened. There was physical evidence, there was some type of DNA present, there was some type of physical assault most likely, there was maybe it was on videotape. right? Those are the ones where there's extreme evidence to prove that, yes, this was not consensual. But all the other ones, right? Rape is a crime that happens behind closed doors, and normally it's between two people, right? There might be more, but normally it's between two people, and it's something that's done in secret. So how are they able to prosecute that? How are they able to pull their evidence, right? That's the sad truth, right? And this isn't information that we share with anybody, but you guys are wanting to sort of get into a field where, you know, you talk to people about their lives and you help them. I want you to be aware, how many of you saw the Me Too movement on Facebook? Right, does anybody? Okay. Like, did that shock anybody? I mean, literally, it was everywhere. Now, I work with sexual assault every day, but like, literally, it was everywhere. My 74-year-old grandmother commented on my post and said, "Me too," right? And so when we look at somebody, at some point, there's a good possibility that they've been victimized. So when you're sitting, and maybe you don't go into victim services, but when you're sitting in front of someone who has a substance abuse issue, or they have been dealing with domestic violence their whole life, or they have a history of mental illness, I can bet you that there's a good chance that there's some type of sexual victimization in there, right? So maybe not ask for it initially, but just be aware that that might be sort of lurking right back there. That might be the reason that they're self-medicating and that they can't seem to get clean, right? They can't seem to sober up. It's because something like this might have happened to them. So really quickly, how victims respond. There's no normal response or reaction, so I want you to be aware of that. So when you go out into the world and you're starting to work with people, be aware that if they do suffer from PTSD, and we know the numbers are high for that with sexual assault victims, that there might be an opportunity, or there might be not an opportunity, I'm not going to say that. There might be a situation where they are triggered, so we'll talk about that as well. But being aware that every victim of some type of trauma, so this one's sexual assault, but every victim of trauma responds differently. So that normal response that we're thinking of is hysterical and crying and hostile and really just overwhelmed with emotion. It might not be that. You might walk into a situation where you expect them to act a certain way. Well, if they don't act that way, that doesn't mean they're any less of a victim. It just means that the way that their body and their brain is processing that is different than what we expect. So we've got to sort of take away our bias at that point and just back up and say, okay, they're handling this different than I expected, so what can I do to help this? These victims may appear calm, they may appear submissive, they might just be completely chill, right? They might be angry, they might be hostile, they might just be completely irrational. Nothing to do with you, it's everything to do with that trauma that they've just went through. Some of the common reactions that we see, fear for personal safety or safety of loved ones, right? So, imagine when you go through something like this, it's not just the place of the assault, the place where the assault happened that scares you, right? Your whole sense of safety is now shattered. So things that you once felt comfortable doing, you no longer feel comfortable doing those things anymore. So at that point, you're afraid to go anywhere, right? The grocery store that you used to go to, you're afraid that you might see that perpetrator. The gas station that you used to go to, right? You're afraid you might run into somebody. You're afraid you might be triggered. So a lot of times it's just that fear, wanting to stay home and wanting to stay in that safe place. Flashbacks. So when I'm talking about being triggered, right, there's a part in our brain, which I'm going to touch on briefly, but there's a part in our brain that stops working when we go through these traumatic events, okay? So when that part of the brain stops working, the part of the brain that continues working is the part of the brain that processes our emotions and our sensations. Right? It doesn't process our language, it doesn't process our memory filing, but it processes our emotions and sensations, which means they're not being fully processed, right? They're sort of in this raw form, and it makes them so much more easily to be pulled back out. So, the color of the shirt that perpetrator was wearing, the smell of the cologne or perfume that perpetrator was wearing, the song on the radio while I was being assaulted, the ceiling tile, whatever, right? The cars outside. Whatever I was sensing, feeling, smelling, seeing, all of that, if I see that again, it can pull that memory back out. And it's not just like, oh, I'm looking at a picture. It's fully like being involved in that memory again. We had a victim one time who was triggered by something on the radio in her car, and she completely wrecked her car, flipped it, okay? These things happen, and they take over your entire body, just like that trauma did at that first point. Problems with concentration or memory, feelings of guilt or self-doubt related to the traumatic events. So, fight, flight, or freeze. So being aware of this, okay? So a lot of of times we only think of fight or flight, right? I'm going to fight to get out of this situation, or I'm going to try to run away. But what we don't consider is this sort of paralyzed with fear, where I'm in this moment and I want to move and I want to fight, but my body is taking over. So regardless of how prepared we feel, when our body goes into that automatic, instinctual, like autopilot, it picks for us. We do not get to make that decision. That is something that's completely up to our body. And then, like I said, the speech center of the brain shuts down during this part. So when you said, did you scream for help? Well, did you say no? I didn't have the ability, okay? Not a relevant question because that was not how my brain was working at that point. And we were going to watch a video, but we're not going to be able to do that. So there's evidence that's stored in the part of the brain that processes our emotions and sensations, but not our language and speech. So this is why it is so hard for a victim to come forward and tell you a beginning to an end story. Not saying it isn't possible, because there are those times where it is, but a good majority of the time they cannot remember important details, right? Think of processing trauma and think of recalling trauma as so some of you taking notes. You're taking notes on your nice, clean piece of paper. You're taking them very tidy. I work very fast. But for the most part, you can look back at it and you can recall what happened in this class. But when you're talking about trauma and how your brain processes that, it's like you have a pile of sticky notes. And you've written things on these sticky notes. You just scribbled them down. And I've taken these sticky notes and I've placed them at random pieces in your brain. So when you have to flip that switch and you have to recall it, you're not just grabbing your notepad and pulling it out. You're having to try to go back and find all of these little sticky notes that have been placed at random places all over your brain. That's why it's so difficult for victims to recall what happened. Right? And it's definitely not going to be a beginning to end narrative. It's going to be something that's very spread out. It's going to take time. It's going to be something that they have to work through. That's another video we can't watch. But PTSD, just being aware that a lot of these intrusive memories, they're gonna basically shut them down, where they're gonna get to a point where they're completely detaching from normal life. They're trying to stay out of it as much as they possibly can. So they're gonna avoid thoughts, gonna avoid feelings, gonna avoid memories, gonna avoid anything external because they don't want to have those flashbacks. They're probably already having dreams of sort of what happened because their brain's sort of starting to process it. They definitely don't want to have a flashback. So like I said, a lot of the people that you're going to come into contact have probably been a victim at some point in their lives. So three times more likely to suffer from depression, 6 times more likely to suffer from PTSD, 13 times more likely to abuse alcohol, 26 times more likely to abuse drugs, and 4 times more likely to contemplate suicide. I did a group at the domestic violence shelter a few months ago, and every single person that was sitting in front of me had been sexually abused as a child. And that was not something that it was, you had to be sexually abused to be in the group by any means, but it was like just over the course of the group, they felt comfortable enough to disclose. And it was crazy for me to see that every single person, the things that happen in our childhood, they sort of form our path. So just being aware that a lot of people have been victimized and we don't know it. Okay, so on to our services. So we're under the umbrella of Helen Ross McNabb, but we are the Sexual Assault Center. So we do serve Kroger, Green, Hancock, Hawkins, Johnson, Sullivan, Unicoi, Washington. So our services that we offer, advocacy and therapy. Now, within 72 hours of you being sexually assaulted, if you need a sexual assault examination, ETSU has just started a program, right? So that's amazing. They have sexual assault nurse examiners. You can go to your medical area here, and they will take care of you. If you're not able to do so, you can go to the Johnson City Medical Center and request a sexual assault nurse. Make sure that's something that you ask for, right? And they'll go from there. It should all be free of cost. There's a statute in place that says that everything provided in terms of a sexual assault examination is free of cost. So just be aware that those options are available. But ETSU has really stepped up and been one of the only programs in Tennessee that has sort of acquired that. So that's amazing for them. But the advocacy and therapy that we offer, they're completely free and they're completely confidential. Only thing we would ever have to report is suspected child or elder abuse. Our advocacy services, so that crisis line that I was telling you about, it's available 24/7, 365 days a year. And we serve victims 13 and older. If you call us and you need help during that examination, then we'll come out to that examination. We also are with you during any police interviews, legal appointments, court proceedings. We will assist you in filing an order of protection if that's something that you need. Support through the criminal justice process. You do not have to report to police in order to receive our services, but if you do, we're going to be with you throughout that entire process. And then, like I said, that crisis hotline coverage. Now, the crisis hotline is out of Knoxville, so you're going to be talking to a Knoxville advocate, but they can relay that information. So our therapists. So this is one thing that makes us different from a lot of places is we have absolutely free therapy. If you've ever been a victim of any type of sexual violence at any point in your life and you're ready to talk about it. If not, that's okay. But if you're ready to talk about it, then you qualify for our therapy. So if you're a victim last week, a victim several years ago, a victim in childhood, you're ready to talk about it, you qualify for our therapy. Our therapist, Melinda Kesey, she is there Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at the Family Justice Center. And they're also offered to secondary survivors, people who were initially assaulted, but the impact from their family, their friends, whatever, has been an issue for them, so they're coming forward and receiving services. So we have individual and group therapy, and we also do child's play therapy. So therapists serve all ages. And just being aware that we're trying to work on getting a Johnson City support group together. There hasn't been a lot of interest, so if that ever is something that you're interested in, then we could definitely get that rolling as well. Okay, so what do you do if you know someone that's been a victim of sexual assault? We want to make sure that your safety is the most important thing. So we want to get you to a safe place. You can call 911 if you're interested in reporting, or call our crisis line, and we can advise you where to go, who to talk to, right? We can make all of those connections for you so you don't feel like you're by yourself. Get medical attention. So if there's something that you need to get medical attention for, just because you go to a hospital does not mean that you have to report. Remember that your body is the crime scene. That evidence collection is pertinent if you're interested in reporting to police, and if they want to convict that person, they have to have that evidence. So just be aware that try not to shower, brush your teeth, eat, drink, use the bathroom, anything like that, because we want to preserve that evidence the best that we can. And then the most important thing, remember what happened is not your fault. It is not your fault. Okay? So that 24/7 crisis hotline, 522-7273, that is the correct number, not the first one. And then the office, 423-202-6427. Okay? Also, if you know anyone that has their degree in social work or something related, we are looking for a therapist. We're looking for an advocate. Our other advocate had a baby, came back, and then she decided she liked her baby more than us. And we get that, okay? So, if you know of an advocate, please sort of send them our way, HelenRossMcNabb.com. The application's on there. If you're close to graduating, that might be something. Yeah, are there any questions? Yes?
Do you have to have your master's or bachelor's?
The bachelor's. Bachelor's, yes.
Do you guys do interns?
We do, and I'm sure that would be something that we would start as soon as we get that advocate. Yeah, but we have interns in our Knoxville office all the time. Are there any other questions? Like I said, I'll get those brochures and get those sent out, and if you have any questions, you can give us a call.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Sorry to run you to the last second there. And I have free